From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Sunny Gray. The authorities in Guatemala have tried to disrupt a caravan of migrants heading towards the United States. The migrants from Honduras spent the night at shelters in Chumilca and the capital city after the Guatemalan police detained one of the supposed organizers of the caravan. Earlier, the police had blocked the path of some of the migrants. The caravan was organized as a protest of the conditions in Honduras and against U.S. immigration policy.
It's going to be difficult, but whoever doesn't fight doesn't win anything. If we don't get to the US, well, we won't know what it's like until we get there. Let's see. We are calling on people for help.
We have received information that our colleague, Bartolo Fuentes, has been detained. He's accused of organizing the event. This is a lie. You can ask everyone here. He hasn't organized any event.
The president of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez, says the caravan was organized by the opposition to undermine his government.
The governments of Mexico, Guatemala and the United States have announced they will apply their immigration laws and further norms in line with their sovereignty. Hondurans should not get involved in this political game because it is inhumane. It is to be condemned. Today, the migrants are in danger. I cannot understand how somebody could use the misery of the people for political ends, risking their lives with children, with the elderly. This should not happen. This should not be allowed under the basic principles of human dignity.
About 8,000 migrants set off on Saturday, but the group later grew to over 3,000. President Donald Trump threatened to cut off U.S. aid to Honduras if it didn't hold the caravan. Before he was detained, Bartolo Fuentes, a former member of the Honduran Congress for the Libre Party, blamed his government for the migrant situation.
In
Honduras, we have a corrupt government. Honduras should be sanctioned for condemning these migrants to misery, for keeping them in a country full of violence. The government of Honduras is corrupt. They have murdered people in the streets. It is a criminal government supported by Donald Trump. They have caused this migration. The sanctions are already there. People are already suffering them.
Julian Assange's lawyers have expressed concern over restrictions imposed by the Ecuadorian government on the WikiLeaks founder. More in this report.
The Ecuadorian government has established new rules against Julian Assange, a refugee in the embassy in London. He has been there for 6 years and he now must undergo a change in protocol that will regulate his visits, medical attention and communication.
We are worried because this is a very strong and nefarious regime. He's being held like an inmate rather than a refugee, and there are restrictions to other rights that people with diplomatic asylum are entitled to.
This concern is shared by activists who have been following the case, especially that since March, access to internet and social networks have been denied to Assange for having allegedly expressed political opinions.
When you see the protocols and the leaked information, it seems that Assange was in a prison in which they're controlling visiting hours, motives, communication, and we're not protecting the person, but rather we're criminalizing them. And Moreno said it as if he was a hacker, a criminal.
Assange, defense lawyer in Ecuador, Carlos Poveda, announced actions which will be taken along with the former Spanish judge Baltasar Garzón, who was visiting Ecuador, which will be directed at Minister José Valencia for having delivered information that was classified regarding Assange's case. According to the defense, it violates its rights.
Isolation is also the situation of the alleged declassification regarding the asylum. What worries us is the enforcement of a protocol that sets restrictions to visits, communications and medical assistance.
In the document, Ecuadorian authorities urged the founder of WikiLeaks to see for the well-being, food, cleaning of his pets and warned that if he does not take the measures, the diplomatic mission chief will ask him to hand over his cat to another person or a shelter. Measurements that are seen as mechanisms to pressure Assange on behalf of the Ecuadorian state.
On Tuesday, Venezuela announced that the US dollar will no longer be used as a reference for transactions in the domestic market. The Minister of Industries and National Production, Tarek El Assami, said the transactions will now be referenced to the euro, yen, or any other convertible currency. This includes auctions under the foreign currency exchange system known as DCOM. The minister also announced that the country is set to open bank accounts in Asia and Europe to facilitate hard currency transactions.
We're going to begin, and we've already advanced with Asian and European countries, the opening of bank accounts that serve as banking correspondents and intermediaries for the operations that are beginning at this moment.
Also on Tuesday, 94 Venezuelan migrants living in Peru returned home thanks to the Return to the Homeland program. This is the 7th flight to depart from Lima.
This young Venezuelan mother worked for 3 months in a hotel in Chimbote in northern Peru, where she barely got paid for 14 hours of work per day. No free Sundays and no holidays. When she called for better conditions, she was fired.
We slept for 2 nights in a plaza with a little girl on the streets, and no one helped us. Nobody. Not even for her. And do you know what it's like to spend the night in the street? Horrible. The cold, the fear.
She's just one of the 94 Venezuelans who's taking the 7th flight back from Peru on the Return to the Homeland program. She wants to close this bitter period of her life when she was a victim of labor exploitation and of sexual harassment. The worst was when she tried to cross the border between Peru and Chile without her child's documents.
I was approached by a policeman. I told him my story because since I saw him in his uniform, I thought he seemed like a serious person. I told him what happened to me, and he told me that he would let me pass if I slept with him. I kept looking at him and talked to the supervisor, and he told me that I was crazy, that it was all a lie, and they didn't believe me.
Among those taking this flight are 7 pregnant women, 27 children, and 18 people with serious illnesses.
I was late for my rent payment by a week and I was evicted. I was kicked out without a penny. The guarantee I had paid 400 soles. Where I had been the last days, living on the street.
What they all have in common is that they all decided to return to Venezuela. They once believed that Peru was the country of opportunities for all. And although they met many Peruvians who helped them along their way, the lack of employment, housing access, and access to basic services brought them to value the homeland they had left.
I'm returning due to the health situation of my son. I went out because of that situation. He suffers from a rare anemia, and I thought that here he could find some cure. He gets blood transfusions because he is dependent on it, and every transfusion here costs me $100.
So far, 8,410 Venezuelans have participated in the Return to the Homeland program. 658 of them returned from Peru, a country where there are more than 2,000 families registered waiting for their return to Venezuela.
2 Peruvian journalists are being sued for defamation by a local bishop whom they accuse of taking part in sexual abuse cover-up. The journalists, Paula Ugaz and Pedro Salinas, both of whom investigated the abuses committed within the Solidarity of Christian Life Society, have been sued by the Archbishop and 2 members of the society. They've been issued a notice from the court and have to respond to it within 5 days. If found guilty, they could face up to 3 years in prison and a $60,000 US fine.
This is a reprisal. This is vengeance from one of the members of the elite Catholic Society against the 2 journalists that investigated and uncovered this Pandora's box.
Archbishop Eguren's attitude in terms of his peers in the church is contradictory and really striking, because doing this is clearly going against what Pope Francis has proposed.
We'll take a short break now, but we'll have more news in a minute.
With developing events being presented through analysis. coverage transcends borders. With renowned journalist Walter Martinez.
Salud, amigos, tripulantes de nuestra querida, contaminada y única nave espacial.
Dossier. Weekdays. Only on Telesur.
Y ponga usted las cámaras, señor director.
Welcome back. Federal police in Brazil are seeking to indict President Michel Temer on corruption. The police have requested that 11 others be investigated for money laundering. The authorities say there's enough evidence against the accused, including the president. Brazilian presidential candidate Fernando Haddad spoke to reporters about possible political alliances ahead of the runoff on October 28th. He also touched on some of his plans if he wins the elections.
I've reached out to people I respect, independently of their political party. I've not invited anyone yet. I'm gauging options. I am speaking to highly respected people. I want to build the broadest government possible. Brazil needs that. But I've not given out any invites. But I'll keep reaching out to people. In contrast with Bolsonaro, we've decided to keep no one from outgoing President Michel Temer's economic team in our government. On January 1st, Temer's team leaves, and a new team will come in.
And our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Ignacio Limas, tells us about the gathering of leftist organizations in support of Haddad.
We are in front of the Unified Workers Central in Sao Paulo, where a gathering has taken place different left-wing organizations. This is an unprecedented gathering since the organizations have unanimously agreed to support presidential candidate Fernando Haddad. The Workers' Party candidate also rallied here and called on different organizations to dialogue with people to reach 10 million votes needed to win the election on October 28th. Social organizations also announced mobilizations in the coming days. On October 20th, another women demonstration will be held, and on the 24th, social movements will take to the streets.
And Haddad, a former teacher, returned to his roots when he attended an event held by Brazil's Teachers Union.
On Teachers' Day, Haddad was welcomed by a group of teachers working as a collective of Sao Paulo. Meanwhile, his political rival, Jair Bolsonaro, was in Rio de Janeiro meeting members of BOPE, a military squad known for human rights violations.
Bolsonaro has only 2 educational projects, to militarize schools and to outsource them. Haddad, instead, has a national educational program that benefits not only teachers, but students.
When Haddad was the Minister of Education, he enforced programs as a matter of priority, such as University for All, scholarships, and the Open University of Brazil. He expressed his regret over the absence of Bolsonaro in electoral debates, and that as 20 years as a deputy, he only implemented 2 projects.
I apologize for not being able to debate with my opponent. The debate was scheduled. I know why he avoided it. It's because his campaign is completely based on lies sent via WhatsApp. The campaign starts now. Our challenge is to take 9% off of him. With that amount, we will win the election. Analysts say it's hard, and it is in fact a difficult task, but it would be more difficult to withstand a government like the one he proposes.
Haddad has promised to revoke Temer's policies, such as labor and educational adjustment reforms, and freezing social investment for 20 years, decisions that were supported by Bolsonaro.
The Senate in Uruguay has approved a project for the rights of transgender people. by 70 votes from a total of 29. Now the project has to be discussed in the deputy chamber. The law fights discrimination against the trans community by providing scholarships and job opportunities. It also recognizes health and housing rights, but harmonization of minors without authorization of adults based in international agreements is still a problem.
This is a historic day. We are hopeful that the majority of lawmakers will vote for this law. The campaign to support this law is aimed at creating awareness that we need to guarantee the rights of the trans community. Even if the Constitution guarantees rights for all, we need this law to protect the trans community.
This is an important day because it is the final stage of something we have been fighting for. The National Council of Sexual Diversity, civil society, and several government offices are supporting this bill. We are hopeful that the bill will be approved, as we have seen the support of the people. We have received more than 60,000 signatures in the last month and a half in support of the law. This shows how important this is.
And before the vote had finished, our correspondent in Montevideo, Mateo Grie, sent this report.
The
debate for proposed law on transsexual people has started in the Senate. This is the first step to pass the law. Trans people in Uruguay have been historically denied their rights. Reports show they have a life expectancy of 40 years and leave home before reaching 18. They do not have real access to the labor market. The trans community hasn't had law that protects them until now. The bill establishes that 1% of public posts are reserved for trans people. It also establishes scholarships to fight the early drop from education. The law also guarantees their protection once in the labor market and medical benefits that the state has to assure. The law has widely been supported by civil society. More than 60,000 signatures were collected before the law was proposed. If the law is approved in the Senate, it will go to the Chamber of Deputies. Social organizations are hopeful that the bill is passed before the end of the year.
Cuban diplomats condemned the U.S. blockade during a heated United Nations meeting on Tuesday. Shouting Cuba yes, blockade no, the diplomats say the United States is using the UN to launch a campaign against the island. The meeting was held by the UN Economic and Social Council under the demands of the United States. Cuban diplomats consider this to be a violation of the organization's rules and charter. They shouted and banged on their desks in protest.
Cuba condemns and rejects this new anti-Cuban action by the United States government. This constitutes an outrage for our sovereignty, and it does not respect our right to self-determination. This is not only an attack to our sovereign country, but also an attack to the principle of multilateralism and the UN basic norms.
We'll take another short break now. Stay with us.
Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your Earth. Green Zone. Wednesdays, only on Telesur. Welcome back. Canada has legalized the sale and use of recreational cannabis.
people started queuing up in Newfoundland to win the title of the first legal buyer. Now, although selling cannabis is legal now, the provincial and municipal government will regulate it. After Uruguay, Canada is the second country to legalize recreational cannabis, but medical cannabis has been allowed since 2001. United States Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has met the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Ankara to talk about the missing Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Following his meeting with Saudi leaders, Pompeo came to Turkey to discuss the crisis and the further course of action. The U.S. diplomat was expected to bring information from Saudi authorities on new developments in the investigation. Turkish media published new allegations citing that Khashoggi was dismembered by a Saudi assassin squad that could be linked to the Saudi crown prince. Wednesday's European Union summit in Brussels is set to push forward Brexit negotiations. British Prime Minister Theresa May will introduce the progress of Brexit negotiations to 27 EU heads of state and government. She will also present a report by the EU chief negotiator Michael Barnier. Meanwhile, the UK remains deeply divided over Brexit, and the British public remain uncertain about what lies ahead.
It's confusing. We don't know what is going to happen. One day they say that, or one day they say that, and we don't know where we're going.
I know about Brexit, but it's so confusing. Nobody knows what's going on. Can somebody tell me or explain Brexit to me?
The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, the FAO, has called for decisive action to reach its aim of zero hunger by 2030. A special event was held Tuesday at the FAO headquarters in Rome, marking World Food Day. According to a report by the organization, the fight against hunger and malnutrition is suffering setbacks due to regional conflicts, climate change, and a poor economy. Hunger has been on the rise for 3 years in a row. The numbers are similar to those recorded for levels of hunger almost a decade ago.
What we're seeing is quite an alarming situation because we have global hunger increasing now for the third year in a row. So that means 1 in 9 people globally, or about 821 million people are hungry. So that's quite an alarming situation of an increase because we've had a prolonged decline after many years.
The United Nations is to allow Palestine to act like a full member in 2019. 146 members voted in favor of the move. The United States, Israel, and Australia voted against. As a non-member state, Palestinians cannot speak in meetings until after member states. Palestine will have equal say and be able to submit proposals in 2019 when they chair the Group of 77 meeting.
This vote today represents multilateralism at its best, with the wider membership supporting a resolution to enable the elected chair of a group to perform its duties effectively. It is an expression of respect for the decision of the Group of 77 and China to elect the State of Palestine as its chair for the year 2019 by acclamation.
A protest was held against the former Secretary of State and National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger at New York University on Tuesday. Kissinger is holding a talk series but has been met with fierce protests for his role in facilitating war crimes and crimes against humanity in the 1960s and 70s. Members of student organizations chanted, "How many kids have you killed today?" holding banners and anti-war messages. Kissinger had a marked impact on U.S. foreign policy in Latin America and throughout the world. Algerian politicians have locked the doors of parliament in protest, demanding the resignation of the House's Speaker. Siad Bouhadja refused to step down, insisting that he won't be intimidated and will continue his parliamentary duties. However, he failed to show up for work during the protests. Algeria's constitution and laws don't allow for the dismissal of the parliamentary speaker.
Today, this is a symbolic protest of solidarity and for the respect of the laws of the Republic and the Constitution. We are gathered here at the Parliament to express our strong refusal to work with Said Bouhadja in the future as our president.
South Africans have been facing up to the problem of food waste in a fun way at a special disco soup event, which was held in Johannesburg ahead of Tuesday's World Food Day. Organizers and NGOs are addressing food waste for World Food Day. The disco soup event in Johannesburg has chefs and attendees preparing meals with leftover food that would otherwise go to waste. According to organizers, 1/3 of food produced for consumption is being thrown out, while 13 to 14 million are estimated to go hungry on a daily basis in South Africa.
For me to be making juices, there is no waste, there is no food thrown away, because if I do agro-processing, each and every plant counts. So I don't have losses.
It means that we're doing good. It's a good thing to do for other people. You mustn't waste food, it's a waste of money.
Robots in Hong Kong are giving morning tea makers a run for their money. The robots can mimic the moves of human tea makers and can precisely prepare the beverage, although some argue that they can't beat the art of their human counterpart, as they have no ability to truly sense what is brewing. We've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And for our viewers in Africa, remember, you can find us on Starstat channel 461 in South Africa and channel 539 in Nigeria. Also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Suni Grey. Thank you for watching.